Hello, 5th and 6th grade. Today we're going to paint some silhouette birds on a piece of shake. This is shake roofing that came from my brother-in-law's mother's house on Horan Drive, which is just up the road from the school. Several years ago, they took all of the shake off and put on a regular shingle roof. And of course, when I saw that coming off, I remembered that my great-grandmother, this is a big piece, it's hard for you to see here, would paint on just about anything. This is an old piece of shake that came off of one of the barns that they had in southern Idaho. She's got a little Easter basket here and a tree here and then this little butterfly up here. Just very, very charming. My great-grandmother would paint on almost anything. You give her a wedge of wood and she's going to make a beautiful doorstop out of it. My great-grandmother inspired me to be very interested in art and taught me how to draw at a young age. She was born in 1897 and lived until 1997 and passed away just shy of her 100th birthday. A tremendous influence on my life. Okay, here we go. Grandmother-inspired shake painting. The paint that you got in your kit was a little bit lighter teal than what I've got here. I forgot to bring that paint home with me. And then you've got some black. I'm sure I've given you way more paint than you're going to need. When you were finished with the project, if you guys would, if you'd rinse out those little containers and then throw them in with your return papers and stuff to come back to school, that would be lovely. That way we can use them again. Okay, the first step, we're going to paint the background, which is the sky, and then we'll take the birds that I gave you, and we're going to, there's several different ways we can get the birds onto here. You can either cut them out and draw around them, or if you happen to have a piece of carbon paper handy, which we've used a lot in the classroom, you know how to use that, you could just put the carbon paper down and then trace the bird. So you want to make sure that you have a pair of scissors and a pencil, and just the paintbrush that comes out in your watercolor kit should do the job just fine. Or if you have a slightly larger paintbrush, that would be cool too. Okay, I'm ready to get started here. I'm going to set my sample aside up here. And the shake that you've got, every piece of it is different. I looked through the crates of shake that I have and got the coolest looking pieces for you guys. They're kind of delicate on the edges, so you might want to be real careful with it. The gnarlier the better. This one's got some nail holes in it, and it's pretty well worn down this end. So you could decide, look at your piece of shake and decide which side you like the best. I'm kind of digging all of this right here, all the variation in color and texture. I think I'll use this side. So to do the sky, let me show you this sample here. You can see that I didn't paint all the way to the edge of the board. Just painting it out and kind of feathering it into the natural wood color kind of gives us a little bit of a vignette, we call a vignette. And that helps to, it's a composition thing, and it helps to redirect the eye back into the center of the painting, onto the subject. So when we paint with our blue, we're going to have it pretty concentrated here in the middle and then feather it out on the sides. So you'll need to get you some water, get it pulled in kind of close. Wet your brush first. This is acrylic paint, so whatever paintbrush you use, you've got to remember when you're finished to completely wash them out, because acrylic paint, when it cures out, gets just as hard as a rock. Okay, here we go. Got a little bit of water. Going to put it in my paint here, and kind of starting here in the middle. Paint very gently. Now you don't want too heavy of a load of paint or too heavy of a coat of paint, because having the color of the shake blade through is really cool. You don't want it so watery that it runs all over the place either. So, okay, here we go. I'm getting a good bunch of paint here, making sure it's not too much. See how I'm starting to feather up here? It's almost a dry brush technique that I'm using up here at the top. And bring it out to the sides. Be very loose and free. Make sure you don't get the windshield washer thing going on. Make sure your strokes, because the grain in the wood is a little bit arched on most of these pieces, and it was the old saws that they used to make these pieces of shake. Left quite an indentation. Okay, getting it going here. Remember to feather it out. Just get you some water and smear it out, but not too much. Almost had too much there. I like the way this up here looks. Bring it on down. You want to paint, up to maybe about 3/4 of an inch or an inch. See how the nail hole there? I'm just going to leave that. I'm not going to fill that up with paint. I think that's awesome. Get dry brush out here. You don't want too much water. Okay, we've got the color of the shake bleeding through, and also all of the old years and years and years of rainwater that is soaked through these pieces of shake will bleed through most paints. And if you're trying to paint your house, like if you've had a roof leak, it's real hard to cover that up. You have to get a product called Kills to cover that up. Then you can paint your color on top of it if you've ever been through any kind of a roof leaking situation. But we like that property of the wood and the paint. We like that with this project. Okay, I'm just kind of smearing away here, making sure that I have it nice and feathered on the edges. Don't want to go quite out to the edge. And as the center starts to dry a little bit, this is acrylic paint and it dries pretty quickly, go ahead and put a little bit more, because right in the center we want to have a little bit more intense color. Leave some interesting areas of negative space in your sky, and that negative space will be filled in with the kind of brownishness. We want it bright enough in the middle that we have a nice contrast with our silhouette birds. Remember the contrast rule. It's one of the most important things about any kind of work of art. You need to have contrast. Some of the lessons that we've looked at in our textbook, we've talked about the various elements of art and how you could see them in the works of art that are pictured in our textbooks. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I may put just a little bit more right smack dab here in the middle, because that's where my birdies are going to sit. Okay, after you're finished with this stage, you'll need to get this completely dry, which should only take about 5 or 10 minutes. So you remember, all these videos are designed so you can pause them and then come back later. So I'm going to completely wash my brush out. Remember to have your paper towel in your hand and to twist and roll, and that gives your brush a nice point so that you have a beautiful brush. You don't want to give him a bad hair day. So get him all cleaned out, and then here's another trick. If you know you're going to be painting again in just a few minutes, just take your brush and wet it. See, it's carrying lots of water, and just lay it on your paper towel like that, and that'll keep it moist. If there's any residual paint in there while you're letting this dry, then it's not going to harden your brush. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get out my hair dryer and dry this layer. You could either set it aside and go outside and play, or do some other homework and come back to it, or you can get your hair dryer. Okay, my piece of shake is completely dry, so I'm going to look at my bird choices here and figure out which ones I want to use. When you're choosing which birds you want to use, or you can draw your own, that's totally up to you. I wanted to give you this option to make the project fun and easy for you. I think I'm going to use this flying away birdie here. And when you're doing an organic work of art like a landscape or something dealing with nature, then you want to usually use uneven number of items. Like in this sample here, I've got 3 birds. So most of your pieces of shake are pretty small. I wouldn't put more than, if you want to put 5 birds on there, that would work, but you might want to be real careful that you don't get it too crowded. I like this fella here that's sitting and looking in. And think about the placement of your birds. This guy's flying that away, and this one is looking this away. So that's another composition thing. You can use those elements to help guide the eye back into the center of the painting. And let me see. Maybe this guy here that's just kind of sitting here looking around. Yeah, I think those are, I don't know, I'm not too nuts about him because he doesn't have a beak. Let me find somebody that's got a beak. Oh, here we go. This guy right here will be fine. All right, there's the birds that I'd like to use. So I'm going to cut them out. You don't have to be too precise. Of course, you need to, pretty much stick to the shape so that you've got it looking like a bird, not like an ink blot. Like all these little feathers that are here, just kind of ziggy-zaggy around them and you'll be fine. But when you get to the head, you need to be a little bit more precise. so that it looks like his head. It doesn't look like the Phantom of the Opera with a hump on his back. There we go. Now we're getting this first bird cut out pretty well. Kind of roundy along the top of his wings. Little ziggy-zaggy on the bottom. And then his tail. I like the tail on this one because see how it fans out. I really, really love birds. In our backyard, and Mrs. Knitting loves birds as much as I do, and so does Mr. Knitting. In my backyard, I've kind of got things planted and bird feeders and all kinds of things there to attract birds. And I love to sit out there and watch them. When we cut this fella out, we're going to cut that line off because we're going to make our own wire there. So while I'm doing this, you go ahead and cut your guys out. Don't cut his legs off though. But you can just kind of go around his legs like that, because then we can freehand them in there. That'll cut down on your cutting time. Remember, you need to be more precise when you get around the head and the beak of the bird, because each breed, God makes them a little bit different. All the different bird paintings that I've done, you realize, it's just fascinating. You realize the differences in the way God made things when you paint them. The first time I painted a zebra, I was just astonished as to how different a zebra is from a horse. I mean, we kind of think, okay, the zebra is basically a striped horse, right? Well, no. Their bone structure is different. The muscles lay on the body differently. The proportion of their body is different, especially in their face. It's just fascinating the way all these different animals are put together. Okay, got one more birdie to cut here. I'm going to start with his beak and be very, very careful around here. And it looks like his feet come out and sit on the line. So I'm going to go ahead and cut around that. And then make that nice and flat there. Oh, he's got a little deviation in his tail there. I like that. So I'll make sure I cut that out so I can draw around it. I think I'll get that later if I can get this main part. There's the back of his wing. And once again, we're cutting a line off because we got our own line that we're going to draw. I forgot to tell you, you need to probably have a Sharpie or a permanent marker. The markers in your paint kit might not work because they're water soluble. They're not washable, but they're water soluble, which that in itself can be cool. You can do some really neat things with water soluble markers. Okay, see if I can get that here without cutting his tail off. Ah, got it. Okay, get all my scraps aside. And let's get our ruler or any kind of a straight edge. You don't really need a ruler for this, but just some kind of a straight edge. And figure out where we're going to put our line. We don't want to put it right smack dab in the middle because, you know, once again, we've learned through our art criticism that you don't want things to look too static. You don't want them to look so stable that they're boring to look at. So a lot of times artists will put the center horizon line, or in this case it's a wire, a telephone wire, slightly above or below center just to keep things a little interesting. So I think I'm going to put, in the lower third here, but not too far down. Just a little line there. And this line does not need to be perfectly straight. In my sample here, it's really straight. But then, you know, you look outside and you look at the different lines that you've got out there, the electric lines and stuff. Some of them are bent like this, and some of them are wrapped around one another like that. Just all kinds of different wires. So I've got a straight line there to start with, but I think I'm going to vary that up a little bit. Maybe put a little bit of a sag in it there. I hope you can see that on the video. I'll go back and erase here where I put my little sag, which is almost in the middle. I'm going to go back with my Sharpie now and go over this, not try and be neat with it, but not so perfectly straight that it looks like you've done it with a ruler. There we go. Just kind of fade out here on the ends. You don't want to come to an abrupt stop. On this end, just kind of sketch it and fade it out like that. And that step was easy. Now let's get our birdies and figure out remember how we talked about the composition? And this fellow's flying this way and this one's looking in. And this one's kind of looking that way. Once again, we don't want to have it too static. We don't want to have them equidistant. So since this fellow's flying this way, it kind of makes sense that this one would want to get out of his way. So let's move him a little closer. Maybe these two guys over here are having a conversation. So we could put two on one side, and then him flying up here over the top. Oh, that's kind of cool. I like that. Okay, where's my pencil? And see how this kind of goes over here, over the wood part that wasn't painted? That's okay, because your black is going to show. And now just you help that fade out. Okay, when you trace around things, remember to push down real hard on them. And trace using sketchy lines. See how I'm going back and forth using some kind of sketchy lines, because we'll paint over this. And then any pencil lines that are left after we do the black, we'll just erase them. That's another thing I really like about acrylic paint. You can make changes, you can paint over the top of things, multiple layers. If you paint something and you don't like it, which I'm real bad about, I'll paint something and just not like it at all, so I'll just paint the whole thing out and start again. Okay, this birdie is done. See, there he is. Okay, we're finished with that pattern piece. These two guys were trying to get a little too close to each other. Okay, remember the feet here? We'll just freehand the inside of that. Keeping in mind I got this little hole here, so I wouldn't want to put my bird head right on there, because that would look kind of strange. It wouldn't give us the birdie shape we need. So I'm going to put him on that side of my hole. Trace around him like this. And when we get finished with the black, we're going to be coming in here and erasing extra pencil lines, because they tend to look a little sloppy. Okay, remember the little dip we had in his tail? Okay, in between his legs, I'm just going to kind of freehand it here. Put a leg here, just a couple sticks. That's all you need. There's the bottom of his tummy. And this fella here is a little bit shorter. He sits down on the line like that. So, around his beak, being very careful, because remember the beak and the head shape and their back shape is very important between different breeds of birds. And my tail is going off down here into the darkness, going to the dark side here. But once I go ahead and sketch it, make sure you can see it. Also, this shake is really soft because of all the years of weathering. So don't push too hard with your pencil, you'll dent it really bad. Okay, here we go, and there's my 3 birdies. Now, if you're not quite finished with your birdies, you can go ahead and pause the video. And I want to make this a little bit more pronounced. I can do that with my paint too, the way his little tail has a little V shape in it. Okay, if you need to pause the video now is a good time and get caught up on tracing your little birdies. I'll throw my trash away, and then we'll be back in just a few minutes. Okay, all your little birdies are traced, and we're ready to paint. Okay, one of the things that I've taught you in the past about your paint brushes is how to get, see, I've got kind of a gnarly edge on that right now from painting here, and so put it in the water, in your paper towel, and gently twist and pull, and you'll have a nice point. All the watercolor brushes that come in these different kits, some of them are even smaller than this. Let me see if I can find the one that I think you guys, yeah, a lot of you have some that are shaped like this. Oh, here we go, this one. A lot of you have that brush. Let's use that one. Then it's more like what you've got. Okay, this is a very nice brush. These praying brushes are really nice. Twist and pull. Okay, when a trick on painting something like this, you want to go, if you're right-handed, you want to go from the left side of your paper to the right, and if you're left-handed, you'll want to go this way, because that way your hand won't be bumping what you've already painted. And also, you're welcome to turn it upside down, which I probably will do to get these tail feathers the way that I want them. Okay, let's go with and my paint here almost kind of dried out. Just get some water, blend it in there with that. You've got yours in a nice little container. Remember, you're going to wash these containers out and return them. That way we'll have them to use another time. This will take a while, so I'm going to very carefully pulling my brush toward me and going right up to my pencil line. Be real careful in small areas. You know, thinking about wanting to cover up your pencil line. That's all fine and good until you start thinking about the shape of the bird's beak and head. You've got to be very careful that you don't get it too cloppy. Okay, here I go with the top of his wing. Down, pulling toward the center. Nice even little strokes. Now here's where it gets kind of delicate. Making sure I retain the shape, go inside of your pencil line, because remember your pencil went up to the edge of the paper. Then out here where the wing is, it's not quite so crucial. Kind of comes to a point there. I like the way his tail fans out, so I'm going to make sure that I retain that concept. This part of it's kind of roundy. And then it fans back in this way. A little bit of water, my black's kind of drying out. Make sure that you touch the side of whatever vessel your paint is in so you don't accidentally get a big old drip in the middle of your sky. Let me see how his tummy goes. Around like this and up. I just kind of like to outline it and then fill it in. And that seems to be the easiest way. Using very careful strokes so that you don't accidentally go out beyond your line. Okay, birdie number 1 is done. Moisten my brush a little bit. Twist and pull. In your little vessel that you've got, you can pull right up the side of it to get your nice point. I'm going to start on this fella here. Start with his tail. I've got kind of a clump of paint in my brush, so I don't want to start at a pointed spot. There, I got most of that out. Now I'll go back and do the little V shape in his tail. And hit this one's wing out and back. And then being very careful of the shape of his head and beak. Around like that, staying inside my pencil line, especially on the head and beak. I'm a little worried I'm going to get my hand in that. You know how clumsy Mrs. Davis is. So I'll turn this back around this way. The bottom of his tail, bottom of his body, and around. Now his 2 little sticks for legs, just, if you use this bird, just come straight down. That's all in the world you need to do with that. Just kind of giving a hint of where those legs are. And it makes sense that it's holding him up balanced. Get the inside painted. Oh, he turned out good. Get a little bit more water, twist and pull. And once again, I got a big clump of paint in my brush, so I'm not going to start with the head and the beak. Paint along here until I get some of that volume out. Remember this guy, his feet kind of came forward and then down. Okay, I've got some of the paint out of my brush, so I'm going to do the top of his head and his beak. There we go. That worked out just dandy. And then down here, it's kind of hard to see where I had this drawn, so I'm just going to kind of fake it. I remember he was almost a scissor tail. He almost had 2 separate feathers coming down. Once again, it's not all that critical. The most important part to get accurate is their head and their beak, and then make sure you get their tails all nice and straight. Okay, I am done with these guys. Oh, that's turning out really good. Wash my brush. Remember, this is acrylic paint. You've got to completely wash your brush. When you're finished with this project, you need to go into the kitchen and get some dishwashing soap, put it on your brush, run it around in circles like this on the palm of your hand until you see no more color coming out. That way you know that you've got it perfectly clean. Okay, I'm going to dry this real quick. Well, actually, no. I am going to take my sample and I'm going to show you guys how to put a hanger doodle on the back of it. So we'll set this fresh one I made right up here so it can dry. And here's my sample. And you know I've got tons of these things around the classroom. Got them here at home too. You know what I mean? I don't throw anything away. But we can make a nice little hanger for the back of this. If you have a ruler, you need to, well, this is longer than my ruler. So I'm going to have to figure that out. This is 12 inches, so I'm going to mark 12 inches here. Because what we need to do is we need to plot center. And then we got 3 3/4. So 12 plus 3 is 15, that's right, and then 3/4. So what's half of 15? 7 1/2 is half of 15. But then we've got 3/4 left after that. So we're going to go up here. Let's look at 7 1/2. And we're going to ooch a little bit this way. It doesn't have to be perfectly precise. Okay, 7 7/8. 7 7/8. That is center. Now you want to have, as far as up and down, it's not that critical, but you want to have it above center so that the weight pulling down on it, make sure I've got this right side up, yeah. The weight pulling down on it will hold it nice and straight. So going from my center point, I'm going to go up to about here. Okay, the next step is you might need to have your parents help you with this part. You're going to be bending this opener tab back just a little bit. Some of you might have really strong fingers. My fingers are pretty wimpy. And you don't bend it very much. But if you bend it too far, it's going to break on you. So bend it about that far, about 30 degrees. And then when you glue it on here, this way, when you glue it on here, that'll be sticking out just enough to hook on a tack or something on your ceiling. Make sure that your center plot is right smack dab in the middle there. And you're going to need hot melt glue for this because school glue just isn't strong enough to hold it up for a long period of time. So put a pretty good wad of hot melt glue there. Paying attention to where your center mark is. Remember my trick of licking your finger and then touching whatever you're working on with hot melt glue? That cuts down on the on getting burned. Now, if you don't have any of these opener tabs and you want one, just let me know. And this Sunday, I'll make sure you get one. Of course, hopefully you'll be turning your work in this Sunday, so I could just put some on for you. But now you know how to do it yourself. Okay, there's our project. Remember to praise God, stay inspired, and keep making art.